Good morning and welcome back to the channel. I'm out in the greenhouse today. It's September 7th and it's time to start getting our gardens ready for fall. As you can see in here, it's still full of life. Everything's still pretty green, but there's a couple of things that we have to harvest before it gets too cold. These are Boston pickling cucumbers and they are slightly yellow, and the one, I do think I let it go a little too long. I really wanted it to get enough sun and enough nutrients from the plant before I harvested it. So I waited until all of the rest of them were ready. As you can see, some of these have a more yellow color instead of this dark green, and I really think that's attributed to the lack of sun that we've had this year and just the immense amount of rain. We did try and give them as much of the nutrients as we could, and I even came in here and tried to move some of the leaves to give them a little bit more sunlight to the actual cucumber, but some of them just turned a little yellow. So we'll see how they taste. I'm excited to try them out. Question that we got a lot of is why waste space on growing flowers when you could be growing other vegetables? And the simple answer is we just like companion planting and intermixing flowers with vegetables. There are a lot of good reasons for it. Specifically marigolds, they're a really good pest control flower. We've always just planted marigolds intermixed with all of our tomatoes and peppers and other produce that we've grown. We just decided to continue that when we moved here, and sometimes it is hard to do pest control and we don't want to use any chemical sprays if we don't have to, so we can use the flowers as a good way to keep away slugs, keep away aphids, and anything else that could damage some of our other plants. I'm out in our big garden and I want to harvest all of the garlic. I really would love to let it go just a little bit longer into the season, but I'm really just afraid that all of the rain that we're getting and all of the rain that's forecasted is just going to ruin the garlic. You're not supposed to water garlic or mildly water it for the last couple weeks before harvesting, and it's just been dumping rain. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull our garlic now, and we still have to start prepping for the new garlic coming in. It should be here in the next couple of days, so I want to get that planted as soon as possible as well, so that can be in before the ground starts to freeze. It's a really pretty bulb of garlic. What we're looking for is the 5 leaves on here that signifies that it's about done, and you really want to wait until the plant is about 40 to 50% dead or yellowed. Like I said, I really don't want all of these bulbs to get ruined with all the rain, so we're just going to pull them up a little early. Nice clean garlic. I think I kind of jumped the gun a little bit in my last video at the beginning of August when I talked about the peas and their production. And this side of the road down here, it does get a little bit more shade. However, these are shelled peas. They start producing peas a little later than sugar snap peas or sugar anns, and they're doing really good. But I wanted to show you how these are doing. They are growing quite a few pea pods, and they are both good. The early frosty and the Alaska varieties are pretty frost hardy. They can pretty much make it through a first frost, so I'm gonna let these go pretty much until we get our first hard frost. I might harvest some as we go along as they start getting a lot of peas in them, but they are starting to produce pretty rapidly now that the weather's changed, so I'm really excited about that. We are in the pepper greenhouse and it smells absolutely amazing in here. Everything just you walk in and it's just a pepper smell. I love it. We do plan to try and overwinter some of the jalapenos, but not this year. That'll be something for maybe next year once we're in our cabin. We just really don't have the room in the RV this year. We received a lot of suggestions for that, and we did actually mention it in our last video that we might try and do that, but it's just not an option for us this year. However, all of the hybrid peppers are doing really, really well. They're producing a ton of peppers, and I have been saving as many seeds as I can from the really good peppers to plant next year, so that way they're even a little more hardy for where we are. When I talked to some locals about peppers, there were some different mixed things, and some of it has to do with temperature and some of it has to do with elevation. And you know, some things that can grow really well in other parts of the state just might not grow as well here. We are on a peninsula and we are along the coast. We do get the coastal temperatures, and that does affect the peppers because they like the warmth, they like the humidity. And so we try and keep it as warm in here as we can. We keep the doors closed and we try and keep the windows closed when we can. Unfortunately, that doesn't always help, especially when the nighttime temperatures drop. We did hit below 50 degrees several times at night, and I know that we had a lot of suggestions for adding heat. That's just not something that's an option right now. So we're testing what works with the climate that we have without making too many changes at the moment, and then in the future we'll reevaluate that. As you can see, I did plant marigolds in with the peppers as well. They did get a little close because they got so big. I planted marigolds in here simply for pest repellent, and they do a pretty good job. We haven't really had anything eating our peppers at all, so that's been a plus. And we wanted to use some of the additional space in here, but we didn't want to take away too many of the nutrients from the peppers by planting something else, so that's why we went with marigolds. These peppers over here are so densely packed with peppers, sometimes it's hard to get them off the branch. Some of these are slightly smaller than I wanted to harvest, but I really want the plants to focus their energy on the smaller peppers. We have so many peppers on these plants, and I think in the next couple of weeks we're going to have to harvest everything. September 15th is kind of our first frost date, and we're approaching that really quickly. It's September 7th, so they don't have much more time. I'll be checking on these pretty much every day for the next week to pick any peppers that need to come off. And then if it hits the first frost and we still have small peppers, we'll just harvest all those and freeze what we have. We're in the tomato greenhouse, and as you can see, everything is a jungle in here. Wherever there's marigolds growing, they are just all in the walkway here. They've started growing outwards instead of up. And I wanted to talk about the tomatoes a little bit. We had a ton of comments regarding pruning and pinching off suckers. Pretty much every couple of days we were up here picking suckers off of these tomatoes. And could we have done a better job pruning and picking the suckers? Yes, we absolutely could have. Back in Pennsylvania, I always planted a different type of tomato, and I never really pruned them or topped them, and the one year that I did, I honestly didn't see a difference in my tomato yield from years previous versus the year that I pruned. It's a learning experience, to be honest. Last year we didn't really get any tomatoes, so I'm happy with what we have this year. We did also have a lot of questions about fertilizing, and yes, we did fertilize our tomatoes. We do have a fish emulsion that we were using. We did add that when they were transplanted as seedlings every time we potted up. I also used it when we transplanted in here, and they got it throughout the growing season. And I think that really did help. We also did the lime in here to reduce the acidity of the soil. We added the steer manure compost, and then this coming season we're also going to add the goat manure. I might try a different fertilizer this year, but that one seemed to work pretty well. These marigolds have just gone absolutely nuts. Here's a split tomato, and unfortunately this is what's caused by the rapid temperature change, or the huge temperature fluctuations. And Unfortunately, it's kind of unavoidable right now, but that's why we're trying to catch them ahead of time. This little guy was hiding all the way in the back, and so I only saw it because it was starting to turn red. So we're going to go through and see what else we can find. It's pretty hard timing the tomatoes with the ripeness versus when they are going to split. We've noticed that right as they start to turn red is when they start to split, so we are trying to pick them before that happens. Another really popular question that we got about our garden is whether or not we open the doors to allow pollinators to come in here. And unfortunately, it just doesn't get warm enough to have the doors open. It might get warm enough on a sunny day to open the windows, but really, in reality, that's only been maybe for about a week here this summer. And so that's unfortunate because we don't get the opportunity to have the pollinators come in with the tomatoes and peppers. However, tomatoes and peppers are self-pollinators, so it's perfectly fine to come in when we come in and check on these daily to just give them a nice shake, and it helps the pollen to produce. But like I said, tomatoes and peppers are both self-pollinators, so you don't have to have the pollinators to get them to produce fruit. Does it help? It does, but it's not something that's absolutely necessary. So I decided to just go through and go ahead and prune everything, severely prune everything. And by that, I mean I'm clipping off the tops and I'm clipping off anything that's got a bloom but no tomato, as well as any branch that's not producing a tomato. That way, this last week or so of energy can be focused on the tomato. And essentially all I'm doing is really just trying to ripen up these tomatoes. I'm really not trying to grow more. I'm just simply trying to get the plant to stress a bit so that way these start turning red. That took a lot longer than I anticipated. I have a lot of tomato plants to take down to the compost. It's starting to get dark on me. I still have to go hang the garlic and I have to get the cucumbers started for pickles. So I'm going to get this cleaned up and head on back down there. It is starting to get dark on me, so I have to work quickly, but I need to get everything sorted. I need to get the garlic strung up to cure, and I need to get the basil tied up to dry as well. All of the garlic and basil is tied and ready to go. I think I'm going to hang it under the cabin. It's nice and dry under there. There's a lot of airflow, so I think it's going to be a really good spot for it. And then we have to go in and wash the flowers and dry those, wash all of the sugar snap peas so we can get them ready to freeze, and then all of the tomatoes will be going into a cardboard box to ripen.
Could have been an easy shot.
I know, she was like broadside, like right there.
Yeah, it's just big old mama and her baby.
Mm.
I was hoping.
Yeah. I could hear her. They were making their way over there quick.
Yeah, well, I think Manelli scared them. But, yeah, I was hoping that it was a bull moose, but no luck.
Yeah.
Or a legal bull moose.
It's time to make some pickles out of the cucumbers that we got out of the garden. I already have the jars boiling in here, so we're gonna go ahead and get our brine started for the pickles. So far all I've added is water, vinegar, and salt, and now I'm adding some sugar and pickling spice. The recipe calls for 4 pounds of cucumbers. I have about 5 pounds of cucumbers, so I'm doing a little bit of extra of each ingredient. Our brine is to a boil, so I'm going to turn it down just a little bit, get all of the jars out, and get them packed. I just added a little bit of extra dill to each of the jars, and now I'm going to pack with my cucumbers. So I did already slice these last night, and I am doing slices instead of spears. I think that would just be easier because I don't have any wide mouth jars, and I only have these regular mouth jars, so I think the slices will be easier than spears. Two things with these. One, I know that one cucumber was a little too big and I was worried about the texture and the flavor, but I tried some when I cut it up last night and it still tasted really good and there was no toughness to the texture at all, so I was really happy about that. The second thing that I did with this recipe is I am omitting the pickle crisp from this recipe. I would prefer to not use it and I just don't have it anyway. And so what I did is I stored the pickles in the refrigerator overnight, and then I waited until the jars were hot, put the cold cucumbers in. They should stay pretty crisp. We're gonna let that process for 10 minutes and we'll check back and see how they look. After that major pruning of tomatoes that I did, I'm gonna go check on them and see if any of them are starting to ripen. not really expecting much out of here, but I am hoping some of them are starting to turn red. I'm back out here in the garden, and it's been about 2 weeks since I came out and did some major harvesting. And what we're going to be doing is preparing for fall. We just got our first hard frost last night, so we're going to go through and do pretty much all of the harvesting for the rest of the vegetables that can't handle frost. I really don't want to lose any of the tomatoes and peppers to frost in the greenhouses. They did not frost last night, and it was quite warm today. And right now I'm in the potato bed, and I'm going to trim all of the tops of the potatoes. There's a ton of different methods to this. What I'm going to do is trim them all to about 4 to 5 inches tall, and we'll come back in about 2 weeks and pull all the potatoes out. The reason I'm keeping these about 4 to 5 inches tall is in case it snows before we dig out the potatoes. It'll likely snow before the ground actually freezes, and I want to be able to see where we need to dig for potatoes in here. Up until today, these potatoes were still looking really good, but the frost did get to them. There's some dead leaves on these, so I'm going to go ahead and just chop all of these too, and then we'll give these the same 2-week time frame before we come in and dig up the potatoes. Some of these carrots are looking really good, and I'm going to pull one just to see how it looks. These are probably going to go until about the ground is frozen. I don't want to pull them too soon, but they are pretty cold tolerant. That's a funky looking carrot. Some of these, this was kind of a smaller one, but this one looks like it's going to be a decent size, and so does this one. I can kind of uncover this one a little bit. Let's see how big that one is. Oh, it'll be a decent size.
I would just grow this type next year because those other ones aren't good.
I know. I'm going to plant a lot of these next year, I think, because
It's raining in there.
So unfortunately, while it was warm today, I think the temperatures at night have just been too cold. It has been getting down below 40 degrees Fahrenheit at night. And you can see this pepper in particular, the entire plant started shriveling, and even the pepper on it started shriveling. And I really don't want to lose any more peppers, so we're going to go through and take every pepper off all of these plants. You know what's really sad about this plant is, like, look at how many bell peppers were started on it. There's like a ton. And there's this little tiny thing. Unfortunately for the California Wonders, I really don't think it was a lack of nutrients in the soil, especially since all of the other pepper plants did so well. I think it's just, honestly, they are a lot slower growing of a pepper than the hybrids, because right now they are booming with peppers, but they're all really tiny because they didn't start producing until about a month ago. So they're all really tiny peppers, whereas everything else has been growing peppers for a couple months now. Well, I think it's just that they take so long to mature versus these hybrids, you know?
And we had like a 1 month growing season.
Yeah, so we need the hybrids that produce peppers super quickly.
If it couldn't grow in June, it was done.
Which these were producing peppers by June.
They smell really good.
Oh my gosh, this whole greenhouse smells really good. I love walking in here.
Does this count as a harvest?
I mean, look at this bell pepper. 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. 19 jalapenos on it. Why couldn't it have 19 jalapenos on it a month ago?
One of these years we'll have a sunny summer. He was stealing a pepper.
Oh my gosh, why?
He broke it off the plant and he was going to take
Did
it.
he really?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Those are for us, not for you. Not for you. I guess he sees me picking them. And
Yeah, so he wants to help. And he thinks that he...
Here, you can have this one. That's all you get.
Did he seriously just eat it?
He just ate it. God, there's loads of them.
I know.
Lord. Here. Was that a good one? Was that a good one? Don't you waste it.
I can't believe that dog is eating pepper. Well, I know some of these are kind of small, but I'd say we got a pretty decent harvest of peppers. We've been continuously picking all of our big peppers as they ripen and putting them in the freezer, and we have quite a bit in there already. So I'm really happy with how the peppers did this year. And it's funny that these jalapenos over here are already starting to grow. I don't think we're going to get anything from those, but these did really well. Next year, I'm definitely planting the entire greenhouse of these hybrids because they just do excellent. Trimming these tomatoes back so much and stressing them out really did help the tomatoes start to ripen up. And we've already come through and grabbed a whole bunch of them. I have a giant box of them in the RV already ripening up. And so we're going to go through, pick the rest of these and get them starting to ripen up. And as they ripen, I've been putting them in the freezer so that way we can process all of the ripe tomatoes at one time.
Giant Alaskan harvests.
Look at this exploding greenhouse of flowers. Calendula is blooming it. Like, look at this marigold.
It's gigantic.
A couple of cucumbers and a couple of tomatoes. While the flowers are absolutely loving it in here and they really haven't minded the cold, the marigolds and the calendula are still blooming, as well as the chamomile. The cucumbers do not like the cold. They're starting to die off and turn yellow. We have a couple of tiny cucumbers in here. I'd really love to let them go longer, but I just think, unfortunately, we'll lose the cucumbers if we leave them on the plant. So we're going to go ahead and harvest those. And we have some tomatoes over here that we're going to pick too. Like, unfortunately, like, that would be a good sized cucumber here if we had like a week more of warm weather. But you see how yellow this plant is?
Mm-hmm.
It's just dying.
This leaf here is dead.
This whole plant on this side is dead. This one's the one that's doing good, and those over there are pretty much dead.
Well, they like a lot warmer weather than this.
Yeah. There's a cucumber down here that I didn't even see.
There's one right below your hand too.
Is there? Oh. This plant has done really good with the cucumbers. A little small. I think this is about the average size of the cucumbers, but these ones are a little small. That's a shame because there's like a teeny tiny one growing right here. It's just not going to have enough time. Do you see any more? Because you are obviously picking out some that I am completely missing.
There's a little baby one.
That's the one I was just talking about. Oh, there's another little... This is like the size of like a... What are they? The little sweet pickles.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the size of those.
Maybe next year.
This tomato split, and I bet it didn't start splitting until it got really cold at night. Because it was not split a couple days ago when I came in and checked on it, but it was not quite starting to turn red yet.
We're planting our garlic in these beds this fall, and I already came in and weeded them, and I added this broken down steer manure fertilizer, and now I'm going to go through and cultivate it a little bit just to mix it in the top 8 inches or so and break up the root mat from the weeds that we're growing in there.
Well, that was easy. This year I'm planting 3 different varieties of garlic. I'm planting the music variety. We had a lot of comments to try that this year, so I went ahead and got that. And then we're also planting German Extra Hardy and the Chestnut Red, which we planted last year. And I let everything soak in a fertilizer soak overnight. It's supposed to help stimulate root growth. And then we're going to fertilize these beds, get the garlic planted, and get it covered in straw. All in all, we planted a total of 263 cloves of garlic, so I'm super excited to see how well that turns out next year. I'm going to go help Chris with disassembling the greenhouses so we can keep prepping for winter. I'm really shocked after that wind last night.
Oh, what, that they held up?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure they would hold up to the hurricane, but...
We are going to relocate this high tunnel up with the other high tunnels in the big open area, and the raised garden beds in here we're going to relocate into the open garden. We have a completely different idea of how we want to do the raised beds in the high tunnels next year, so this is a great time of year to get all of that moved over and prep for the spring. good boy? Are you being a good boy? You're a dirt ball.
Looks like they've rotted a little bit over the last 2 years since we put them in.
Yeah, I'm not surprised, but
Yeah, I mean, they were already old wood.
yeah. Unfortunately, the onions didn't do too great. They didn't grow into big bulbs, and honestly, I think that's just, they just need to be started earlier and possibly the lack of sunlight. So what I'm going to do is harvest all of the onions. We're just going to use them as spring onions and kind of like green onions, chop them up and put them in the freezer. So I'm going to go through and harvest all of these because we're going to put those raised beds in here and fill those beds with this dirt. That one's actually almost the size of one of those cooking onions that you buy.
Like the steel.
Fine. You can have one of these, but there's no peas in that one, so you can just eat that. Here, Brianna, you can have this one too. Doesn't have any peas in it. No, you may not eat them off the vine.
I gotta go up.
It's been just over 2 weeks since we snipped the tops of all the potatoes, and we left the potatoes in the ground so their skins could thicken so that way they last longer in storage. So I'm going to go through today and harvest all the potatoes. This was the row that the garlic was in, and these are Yukon Golds, and then I'm going to go dig up our russets in the other bed. That's a tiny potato. What the heck? It grew like, look, like a couple of these really nice potatoes, and then look at this one.
I mean, even my...
It's stuck on the mound. So,
fix all the dirt.
thank you. Oh, there's one there. There's some little ones in there. Tuber's got some burr. Oh, I didn't realize you were picking potatoes out.
Yeah.
Just buried them. Where'd that go?
There's a tuber.
There's a potato. There's another. This one did well. There's a tater.
There's one.
Oh.
There's one. Next one.
Well, no, that's the tuber from all the ones that we were just pulling out. They are, because I was picking from these.
For being self-sufficient.
We're finished harvesting all of the potatoes, and we were really hoping to get a lot more. I planted 5 pounds of potatoes, and I'm going to estimate that we got about 25 to 30 pounds of potatoes here, and it should have yielded about 50 pounds. And unfortunately, this dirt isn't as great in this bed. This is just what we had to work with our first year of gardening, and we did add a little bit of amendments to this to try and make it better. But I think that we're going to do something different with this bed next year and move the potatoes and maybe even try a couple different varieties.
Even the drill will take them out.
Maybe not.
I think I need to put a bar through it and pull.
That to get that back out.
Well, I don't think it would break the drill, but I don't think it'll pull it out. Hook a chain to these, put the skid loader and pull them off.
Just yank them out. music, which as of today, I can remember what I planted where.
Yeah.
But a year from now, when I go to pull it up, the only one I'm going to remember is the red one.
Yeah.
What Chris and I started last night and we're going to continue today is filling in more rows in this garden. This past season we had this huge open space right here, and that's because year one we had a lot of small rows and the dirt just eroded away over time and it compacted a lot. So we used the rows that were in this section and bolstered up the rows that we used this year. So now we're replacing them with new composted dirt from our compost pile and filling in all of this section so it's not unused space. We wanted to do this in the fall because in the spring there's a very, very small time window between when we can actually get to the dirt when the snow melts and when the ground thaws to when the plants actually have to go in the ground. And during breakup it's extremely muddy and soupy, and we really didn't want to be running the skid loader back and forth to the compost pile. So that's why we decided to do it now in the fall while the ground is more dry and get this prepped and ready to go for the spring.
Right now we're liming the soil because we do have acidic soil, and then the spring we'll come back and we'll put in the rest of our amendments that we plan to use.
This garden's officially prepped for next spring, and so we're going to close it up for the winter and we're going to head up to the other high tunnels and get those torn down as well. Unfortunately, it is kind of a pain to take the plastics off of these every year, but with these being pretty low budget high tunnels, they're really not made to withstand the weight of snow. And if we get one really good snow and don't get out here in time to brush the snow off, it could collapse them. And we really don't want the plastics to be ruined from the heavy snow. We've seen a ton of greenhouses, even ones that are made to withstand it, even the heavy duty shelter Logics we've seen all collapsed around here because of the heavy snow. And so it's just easier to take them down at the end of the season and then put it back up in the spring. Stuff 'em. There we go. Not quite sure how, but we missed the jalapeno. So that'll be nice to have. Maybe we'll be able to get a couple seeds from this to grow a couple jalapenos next year.
Forward, backwards.
Still not getting that.
That one's tough.
Thinking the time for me to get one, you'll have all the rest of these out. Maybe I should have done that one. That one looks loose. Yeah, I can't get this.
Split.
Huh?
Doing a split.
Is gardening in Alaska worth it? Well, unfortunately for us this year, it was not worth it. As you can see, this is the majority of our harvest with the exception of some of the food that we've already eaten. So there's a lot of factors that attributed to the lack of growth, and the number one factor is the temperature. After late June, our average temperatures here are roughly 55 degrees Fahrenheit during the day, and they were dropping into the 40s at night. And that's a little too cool even for cool weather crops. We noticed with the potatoes, for example, that in the beginning of July, our first night of plummeted temperatures into the 40s, the leaves just started to die off and started to yellow. For the potatoes, we planted roughly 5 pounds of seed potato, and we only harvested about 30 pounds of potatoes instead of the 50 pounds that it should have yielded. And that's really a good example of a cool weather crop that just did not do well in the cold temperatures. With the tomatoes, we harvested roughly 34 pounds of tomatoes, and that's not including all of the small green tomatoes, which we ended up pickling, and we got just a couple of jars of these, but that's really not a great harvest of tomatoes, especially with the amount of tomato plants that we planted. And a lot of that, I believe, really has to do with some of the varieties that we chose. All of the varieties we planted were Alaska variety seeds. They are cold tolerant. However, one of the varieties did not produce any tomatoes at all, so we're not going to plant those next year, and we're going to focus on the tomatoes that actually did give us tomatoes this year. And we're hoping for a little bit warmer temperatures next year, so that way we can get a higher yield from the plants that do produce. Moving on to the peppers, we got about 17 pounds of peppers, which I thought was pretty decent considering we only received peppers from about 50% of the plants that we even planted. Unfortunately, the jalapenos and the California Wonders just started producing fruit too late in the season. On our last gardening video, we showed that they hadn't produced at all, and they actually started producing at the end of August, which is the end of our growing season, which runs roughly from mid to late June until August. So unfortunately, those varieties just take too long to grow. So I think we're going to focus on just the hybrids that did really well this year. For the cucumbers, I did only plant 4 cucumber plants, and I'm kind of happy with the yield of those, even though they weren't as great as they really should have been. They should have flourished with cucumbers. We got roughly 7 pounds of cucumbers, and we made a lot of pickles, and we still have a couple more cucumbers to do some things with. Last fall, I planted roughly a 1/4 pound of garlic, which isn't a lot, and we did get an okay yield, but some of the cloves did not get as big as they really should have. So this year I added that music variety in with the chestnut red and the German extra hardy, and we planted a ton more, so I'm hoping that we get a bigger yield this coming year. For the peas, we planted both shell peas and snap peas, and the shell peas honestly did terrible. I'm not quite sure why they did so bad, but I did about a 15-foot row of those, and this is pretty much all we got of them. We tried to let them go as long as possible, and once these are shucked, they're really not going to provide a lot of peas. We might get maybe 1 or 2 jars of peas out of those. The snap peas did excellent, and for that 15-foot row, we got roughly 3 pounds of peas, and that's not even including what we've already eaten. We loved going out and picking them throughout the summer and adding them to stir fries. So I definitely want to do a ton more of those because they were an excellent producer in this cold weather. And last but not least, we have the onions. And unfortunately, they just did not have enough time to produce. And I think that next year I'm going to start them even earlier. Next year will be our last year to try onions. And if they don't grow, then we just won't do onions again. But out of the onion tops and the essentially what a spring onion is that we got, we harvested roughly 3.5 pounds of those. So we chopped those all up and added them into the freezer, and we'll just use those as we would regular onions. We really do appreciate all of the comments and suggestions towards our garden, and really, I don't take this lightly at all. We have been doing the absolute best that we can with getting the proper amendments in our soil and fertilizing everything that needs their specific fertilizer. And unfortunately, with the temperatures, it just hasn't been a great yield for the last 2 years. There are a lot of different things that we could do for our garden, and we did receive a lot of suggestions, as in using heat and UV lighting. And unfortunately, when we're trying to keep our cost of our grocery bill down, we can't invest even more into our garden. Unfortunately, investing in all of that will just lead to it never adding up. Obviously, we do love the health benefits of growing our own food and not having to purchase it from a store, but we are trying to do this on a minimal budget. Each year here is an experiment of what varieties of vegetables are going to work and what won't. And unfortunately, in the climate that we live in, there just might be some varieties that grow great elsewhere that just don't do well here. With us trying to lower our grocery bill, that might mean growing a whole greenhouse full of potatoes one day. We're not quite sure, but we're gonna keep trying. We're not throwing the towel in yet on gardening. Every year we're gonna try something just a little bit different to see what works, and maybe even different types of produce to see what else will grow here. One example of this is next year we are going to plant a ton of what actually produced this year. As you saw in our garden, we added a ton more dirt in that big open space. We only used about maybe 40% of that garden this year, and we just ran out of time last year. So this coming season, we're going to plant a ton more and see how that goes. So I hope that answers some of the questions that we received on our last gardening video. And after putting the dirt in our garden today, I am really excited to see next year's garden come together. I can't wait to get seeds in the ground and see how they produce. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.